2025 was a good year for shark movies, where we had a few decent ones being released. So let's see what 2026 brings us. Now this technically is a 2025 movie, as it was had its kind of premiere then. But we are talking Ghost Divers, and this one is directed, written and starring Mark Clark. Now this is a low budget movie. It does have a little bit of a unique selling point, which we'll come on to in just a second. And it's actually, it comes from a good place in many ways, because it's kind of detailing the plight of local men in kind of Honduras and that kind of area that are being exploited for lobster fishing. And I'll come on to that again, but let me tell you the story. It focuses on a group of marine biologists who want to study a whale shark that is about to give birth, and they want to kind of capture it on film. So they travel to the waters of Honduras, and they run into trouble. They hire a boat with a kind of secretive sea captain who may be hiding something, but they run into trouble out while they're at sea. The propeller comes off the boat, and they're surrounded by sharks, all varieties. But not only that, as well as the sharks they have to contend with, they are spirits or ghosts or even zombies of dead local men who have been killed whilst trying to obtain lobsters for, you know, American companies and things like this, and who these companies have exploited these kind of local men and kind of left them out on sea when they kind of get the bends and things like this, because they don't have to deal with the this kind of like the hassle of having to kind of look after them and things. So now our group of biologists have to deal with the fact that they are stuck at sea without a propeller, no food, no water. They are surrounded by sharks and sea zombies. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So this is kind of based on a fact that there are examples of local men in this kind of area being exploited to do this kind of lobster fishing, many of whom suffer from decompression sickness, the bends, you know, and possibly some of them have been left to die. And, you know, the movie comes from a good place, giving a portion of its proceedings to the charities that support that. So that must be commended first and foremost. So I will give the movie a shout out. Written and directed and starring Mark Clark. I will say, I think this movie seems like, rather than a group of filmmakers who want to make a film about diving, this movie feels like a group of divers who want to make a film. And we'll come into some context about why that I say it like that. But let's talk about the positives first of all. Now, I think as a film, this movie has an interesting concept, because you have really two threats here. You have the sharks, and lots of them, and then you also have these kind of like ghosts or zombies, kind of however you want to kind of look at them, that are also a threat. So you have a double threat, and really not since Zombie Flesh Eaters have we seen sharks and zombies in the kind of the same movie, really. So, you know, it gives it this kind of unique sort of selling point where, it, you know, the idea of how these kind of spirits have ended up there, and it's quite an interesting one, and obviously based on, well, at least inspired by a reality that's actually kind of happened. And I think it's a neat concept. And the movie, although it has some technical flaws, which we're definitely going to be talking about, it has somewhat of a haunting feel to it, where we have these kind of silent, kind of people just kind of seemingly walking around on the sort of the seabed, just kind of wandering around trying to drag innocent people to their deaths via drowning. And it does make for some haunting imagery, I have to say. The other thing as well is that this movie is a shark, in regards to the sharks at least, it's a film that isn't relying on kind of CGI sharks. There is a little bit of digital VFX, as we'll talk about, but for the most part it's actual sort of wildlife photography. So This is why I say this movie feels like it was made, well, part of the reason why it was made, a film made by divers rather than a film about divers made by filmmakers, because, you know, obviously these are very skilled divers. We actually see these divers handle sharks, pushing them away, and there are scenes here that are obviously shot, you know, out at sea with real sharks, where they are, you know, the sharks coming up and checking these guys out, and they are legitimately kind of like pushing them away. So there's obviously a genuine element of danger that's been kind of captured on film. And I will say there are some good underwater photography within the movie. Not all the time, but certainly there are some scenes that do have that. So, you know, the film has moments, I think, of true wonder whilst you're watching it, that are scattered through the film. And the concept, as I've mentioned, I think is a genuine solid concept. I think the idea here to incorporate these kind of ghostly ocean floor zombies is an interesting one, and it has moments where I do think it works. I think it does build some good mythology here. I think it tries to have a little bit of human drama involved as well. So the movie, I think, comes from a good place, and I think, and B, a fairly good idea for a horror film that is obviously based on, you know, the exploitation of people in real life, but also a good idea for a horror film as well. But this movie, I think, suffers from probably a low budget and inexperience as filmmakers, as experienced as these people might be, and this is my speculation, as divers and possibly shooting underwater for, you know, the purposes of you know, making a documentary and things like that. For a film, for a narrative, for a piece of entertainment, it is lacking. So let's discuss why that is. So first of all, I think the movie is too long. I think this movie, because of the length of it, I mean, it's around sort of just under 2 hours, so it's not a mega long film, but it does suffer from pacing issues. I think some of the scenes seem more drawn out than they needed to be. I think the movie relies a little bit too much on some melodramatic moments with our cast on the boat, that I think feels like it pads out the story more than it needed to. And because of the length of the story, it just, I think, dissipates any sort of feeling of excitement, maybe, by having these kind of longer, more, I mean, you could arguably say thoughtful scenes, but the movie ends up becoming a little bit sort of pacing issues, let's just say that. So there's that. I think the experience of the filmmaking side of things is a little lacking here. I think some of the directorial choices are rather weak. A lot of it is underlit. There's some very, very choppy editing. There's lots of kind of quick cuts with close-ups. You can't really see what's going on a lot of the time, especially, I mean, some of the shots underwater are good, but a lot of it is like very, very close-up, just bubbles or quick shots of like someone's mask or something like that. You can't really see what's going on. It's kind of underlit at many times, and again, I think the filmmakers here are probably capturing things in the natural light, or they've got a filter on it sometimes, but they're not thinking cinematically. They're not thinking what will make a good movie, how it's going to appear to an audience. This is my speculation on this. So at times the movie feels quite poorly made on a technical level. You know, there's kind of sometimes the camera's like moving around a little bit too much. It's a little out of focus at times. It just seems very rough and ready on a kind of a technical basis. The acting, I've got to be honest with you, is not strong. And again, I'll come back to the point, and this is my speculation. This is a movie that feels like it's made by divers who want to make a film rather than filmmakers making a film about divers. And that's what I mean by that as well. It just feels like the art of filmmaking is secondary to the kind of the more, you know, these guys wanting to dive and wanting to document that experience and incorporate a story into that sort of thing. I I think the actual, as the narrative goes, like I said, I think this is a genuinely good idea for a story. But I just think how the movie kind of plays out, especially in regards to our kind of captain. We spent a little bit too much time with his kind of backstory and his secret and his kind of first mate and all that. It wasn't, but I don't think it didn't need to spend as much time in here. He could have had a leaner story. I think you needed to have more characters involved. That you could have had like there is a kind of a section at the beginning where we see the kind of like the greedy owners of this kind of lobster operation, but I think we actually needed to have maybe more of that. There is shark attacks, but it's all sort of again, lots of splashing around. It isn't maybe the most exciting film to watch in regards to this kind of thing. So although I think this movie obviously comes from a good place, I think it has a good idea, but it's the execution. It's just poorly executed. And again, I think it's just probably down to lack of experience and lack of budget, because it does feel low budget, rough around the edges, poorly put together on a kind of a technical level. Story elements are kind of misjudged. Things here just seem the priorities seem to be a little bit askew, in my opinion, to make for an interesting story. Maybe they would have been better off making a documentary about this situation rather than a narrative, because I think it does fail a little bit at being a narrative for entertainment with a kind of a message in it. It just kind of feels like they don't quite know what to do. So it's rough and ready. There's some good sort of shots here and there in it. I like the idea, but as a piece of entertainment, I do think it kind of fails, I have to say. Which I'm sad to say, because as I say, this movie does come from a good place. I'm going to be honest though and say this is probably a 3 out of 10 for a film. But if you want to watch it for some interesting ideas, you may still want to check it out. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time.